Welcome to the ATA podcast, where we talk to former elite athletes sharing their insights and wisdom derived from successfully transitioning into life beyond the game. Very warm welcome to the Athlete Transition Accelerator podcast. I'm delighted today to be joined by Emily Craig, a lady who has rowed for many, many years, come up through the ranks, run European titles, is a world champion, an Olympian, competed in 2 Olympics and culminated with a gold medal in Paris. So, Emily, fantastic CV there. Thank you very much for joining us and giving us your time today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Now, the first question we always ask everybody, I know it's relatively recent still that you retired. It's only a couple of years ago that you officially stepped out of the rowing world. But what are a couple of memories or one memory in particular that elicits a sense of pride now that you can look back on that chapter in your career? What gives you that sense of pride when you're able to reflect now that you're no longer competing?
I guess the obvious one is that I completed it.
Yeah.
Um, I think yeah, winning the gold in Paris was very much like the end of the chapters and sort of scratched an itch in a
Yeah.
way. And I think I look back on the fact that I was able to make that happen with a mix of pride and also privilege, because I don't think it wasn't a given and nothing was owed to me. So it's kind of a mix of like, wow, I made that happen, and oh my God, I'm so lucky I could make that happen.
Yeah, and I think I'm not in any way prejudging everything we're going to talk about, but it sounds like you're able to sign out on a high. And so many athletes that we talk to, guests that we've spoken to, circumstances beyond their control, injuries, finances, etc., almost rob them of that opportunity. So having rowed since you were a young girl to be able to finish your career on the podium with a gold medal, I mean, how does that fit? Just for us uneducated mortals, how does it actually feel to have that gold medal hung over your neck? Having as I think was it you're 9 years of age or 12? How old were you when you
Well,
started rowing?
yeah.
12. So having gone on that journey, try and describe the emotion when that medal's placed over your neck.
Uh, I mean, when we crossed the line, it was mostly disbelief. I think you're so focused on the process and getting it done and making it just another race. And then we crossed the line and it was like, oh my God, it's done.
Yeah.
And then certainly I remember the whole medal ceremony, I was crying, very ugly crying, no good photos.
I don't think anybody looks
Um,
good when they're crying though.
no, it's not great. And also just wanting the moment to last forever, but knowing that it wouldn't, and kind of trying to sort of savor every second of it, I think was
Yes.
the main part of it.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, we're going to talk a little bit about what you're doing now, but just I want to step back to no doubt what is a painful memory, but it's particularly impressive, even more so what you did in Paris when we cast our minds back to Tokyo, because in that particular Olympics, you were 100th of a second with your partner off placing in the medals. And I think you told me when we were talking prior to recording, less than half a second from first place. So it was a photo finish and you fell just short. How difficult was that to deal with, having trained so hard for so long and come so close in an Olympic final?
Um, very hard to deal with. There was a lot of stuff going on in my personal life as well that sort of combined with that whole sort of 18 months of my life. I mean, it was like the training going into it, the COVID, like having to just constantly deal with that stress, and then finally getting there, getting to the start line, knowing that maybe we could get a medal, maybe we could win. And I think that was the difference between Tokyo and Paris. It was a maybe rather than a 99%
Right.
certainty. Um, but you just, yeah, you cross the line, and I mean, I knew we'd come fourth when we crossed the line,
Did
so
you?
immediately had that just kind of empty, like, okay, guess that's it. It wasn't until I was in anti-doping with one of the coaches when he was like, "Oh, do you want to see your photo finish?" And I was like, "Sorry, what?" So I didn't know how close it was until like yeah, about an hour or so afterwards. I don't know whether or not that made it better or worse. I have the photo finish on my wall. It's still there. It's been there since Tokyo. But I've never watched the race. There's just difference between not wanting to relive the emotions of feeling the French and Italians moving away from me and not being able to do anything about it to the actual image, which I was kind of like, well, I need to leave this Olympics with something, and this is quite a cool image. Like, not it was fourth, but like, look, what a fourth
Yes.
um,
I
sort
was
of. I
going to
think
ask that out of curiosity, why the image, and you've articulated it perfectly to take something from it, and how, because we talk a lot about transferable skills, and we'll touch on that as we go through our conversation, no doubt. But it seems almost trite to say, well, look at your resilience, because to come so close, and everybody knows there's a cycle leading up to an Olympics. It's not just we've got another game next week, we can pick ourselves up. It's years of preparation to come that close. How quickly did you process it? How long did you think about, well, that might be it? Did you immediately say, I'm going for Paris? And how long did it take to process that disappointment and get back into the grind of training again and moving forward?
quite a while. I'd initially planned to retire after Tokyo, mostly because we thought that would be the last time our event would be run. And then actually because of COVID, they kept the lightweight double for another Olympiad. So there was kind of that element of it. And then the stuff that I mentioned in my personal life, that took until about January 22 to be resolved anyway. So I ended up taking about 6 months away. I got a job. I needed to find a bit of identity and a bit of freedom away from rowing. I think one of the hardest things about coming fourth and not getting that medal is like having to sort of work out that you're worth more than just that result.
Hmm.
On top of, COVID making everything very, very tight and shut down. Like my world got very, very small because it was focused on this one thing. So I needed to take a step back and kind of take stock and let everything settle down. I'm quite lucky that Darren and Imo, so my coach and doubles partner, both, were pretty much like straight, like, okay, well, we're going again. But neither of them pressured me into making the decision. I was very much like left alone to kind of go do this job, train around it, sort of feel my way through to then being like, actually, yes, I do want to come back and do it. And part of it, again, was that photo finish that I look at it and I was like, well, the worst year of my life. And that's how close I was to winning a gold. So if I come back and everything's good and goes well, how far ahead will we be in those circumstances? So that was kind of the main sort of thought going back.
Yeah, no, good for you, and it's a fairy tale ending, having made that difficult decision. Just one question on identity that you touched on there, Emily, because a lot of people wrestle with this. A lot of people talk very candidly on the podcast that they've struggled with it, and a lot of people talk privately to Carl and I in our coaching sessions that they're struggling with it. So, is there anything that you could distill from that period, those months where you were looking for, wrestling with identity, that will help people that are listening? Is it a case, without putting words in your mouth, that you just needed space, you needed to step away, you needed time to think? Because people often say to us, I'm struggling with identity. This is all I've known. So
Hmm.
what comes to mind having gone through that process? I know you then decide to step back in and you've then subsequently retired, but just on that very particularly pertinent topic of identity, just curious on your experiences.
I think it's always been something I was aware of throughout my career because I was always going to be a lightweight. So there was only ever going to be two spots, which changes it. If you're an open weight sweeper, then there's like six spots
Hmm.
or more, probably more. Anyway, um, so there was always like a very small chance that I'd ever actually make it. So my academic background is art, history of art, and then Asian art as a master's degree. So keeping that going was always quite an important part of sort of being able to cope with stuff. But
Hmm.
again, COVID kind of reduced opportunities to explore identity away from rowing, just because it just really didn't allow for it.
Of course.
So it was kind of a natural, like, okay, well, I'm going to lead into this. What job can I get that's in the art world, sort of art world adjacent? It was numismatics, which is coins. I don't like coins.
Right. So you got to try it to decide that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm glad that I had like a foundation and knew what I wanted to do away from rowing. So it was nice sort of already having the direction of like, well, what jobs am I going to apply for? Like these ones, where am I going to look for work experience in this sector? And then part of it was moving house as well. I used to live in Henley and I found it very claustrophobic. Like you go to the shops and you bump into seven rowers whilst you're trying to buy milk. And I
Yeah.
just really hated that. So moving to somewhere where I had easier access to London and having the opportunity to like go for dinner with friends, go for drinks, go to the theatre, not worry about the last train home, and it like actually allow myself to have that downtime. And
Hmm.
when I went back into the team, it was actually one of the things that I was quite firm on keeping hold of, like being allowed to have a life.
Hmm.
So the first year I went back, we were on a training camp and we had a weekend off in the middle of this camp, and it just so happened to be one of my friends' weddings that weekend. And I was like, well, can I fly back and like go to this wedding and then come back again? And they were like, yeah, okay, actually, that's fine. Because there was much more of an understanding of like, well, I'm here to win a gold. I'm not going to cock it up. I think I can go to this wedding and enjoy it and
Yes.
decompress. And that level of trust and freedom just wasn't there in the previous years I've been in the team. So being allowed to find a bit more identity in those 6 months and then take it through into those last sort of 2.5 years on the team was a massive part of why we were successful in Paris.
No, that's a great insight, Emily. And there's threads there that naturally I'm just going to quickly pull out because, a lot of people talk about the pressure of identity being significantly easier when you have a bit of a plan for what's going to come after sport. And we're going to come back to what you've just touched on there, what you're doing now. But the fact that you were still in academic studies, you were still developing your education, you had an idea of where you wanted to go after rowing, that makes it much easier than just stepping off a cliff and saying, where do I start? I think the other element of social network, decompression, being able to step out of the bubble of elite sport, as you've alluded to there, friends, dinners, weddings, going to the theatre, they're all essential steps, not just post athletic competition, but also whilst you're in there as well. I think mental recovery is so easy to neglect. So bringing it back to you on that one, then obviously, just tell us what you give us a little bit of an overview of why did you decide that now's the time to retire? That's always an interesting question. You've already touched on that. And then what have you done since you retired? What sector you're in? What do you do now? And then we'll explore that a bit further, Emily.
So I very much went back with with this is it, it's Paris, like you're not doing another one after this. So very much went back with it being like, okay, these are the 2.5 years. I have to walk away from this, regardless of the result, and be okay with it.
Hmm.
So quite a lot of thought was put into that. I had a very good therapist through those 3 years. Um, it was quite an easy decision in terms of our event, like I said, was not going to be continued through to LA. So it would have meant essentially going back as an open weight, overhauling my entire body, going back to scratch, kind of like, yeah, it would have been a lot. I had a lot of injuries, continue to have a lot of injuries.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, I just knew I didn't want to do it beyond that point.
Yeah, makes
Which
perfect
definitely,
sense. And
yeah.
did that make it a bit easier? Right, this is it. Once you've made that decision in your mind, there's no if, buts, and maybes. Obviously, there's some external circumstances there, but there were still options. You could have gone into different categories, but no, this is it. My cards are on the table now. It's Paris, and then I'm done. Did that make it a little bit easier to move forward with that clarity?
I think so. And I tried to not make it too like cut and dry. So in the run up to Tokyo, I did a lot of like, oh, this is the last time I'll ever do X. This is the last time I'll ever do Y. I have a story about a marble pig that I got from this training camp that
Well, you
I was
got to
like, I'm
share
gonna
that now.
come.
You can't mention a marble pig and
Yeah.
not explain it to us. Everyone's going to say,
Um,
"What you should have asked her? What was the marble pig?"
She was just always there in reception as like a little souvenir, and I quite liked it. And the last time we went, so it was a viz in Portugal, and we were there in March 2020, and I was like, well, this is the last time I'm ever coming here, so like I'll buy this pig as a little reminder, like gonna be done.
Yeah.
I've now been back to a viz, I think like 5 or 6 times.
Without the pig, you don't take the pig
Without the
back.
pig, it does sit on my shelf. I can see it right now. It reminds me that never say never.
Hmm. Love
So
it.
going into Paris, like really it was going to be it, but not saying that and not making it so final because I think that would have put a lot more pressure onto it. But having that like, well, I'm like 90% there, but like I don't want to.
No, it's a great insight of how you're managing your mental well-being
Mm.
as well, isn't it? And dealing with the pressure. So no, I love that. So tell us what you're doing now then. So you made that decision, you stepped out, and where's that taking you, Emily? Because that's obviously the fascination for all of our community. Where do elite athletes go? What are they doing now? How are they living their lives?
So when I initially retired, I was working in another numismatics auction house, so doing their media and marketing. Um, didn't enjoy that very much. It was mostly taking photos of coins in a basement. Um,
Yeah, you're not selling it. No.
no, but it was quite a good job in terms of, I think, well, first of all, it gave me a high enough salary to buy a flat, which was a big kind of thing for me to be able to do post athletic career. And it was also quite nice having a career or like a job that was based in London that not that I didn't care about it. Like I still tried really hard and did the best of my abilities with it, but like I wasn't, it certainly wasn't as intense or the be all and end all in the same way as the
Of
Olympics
course.
was.
Of course.
Um, so actually, I think having that space away from a job being like a lot of your identity was quite useful. I left just before Christmas, and now I'm working in a gallery that sells pictures, everything through to sort of old masters, so like 1500s all the way through to post-impressionist, like 19th, 20th century, which I'm loving. And I'm doing it part-time, which is actually quite nice because then I do a bit of online PT, a bit of coaching, a bit of public speaking. So it's been really lovely, like having a bit of space to go and do a bit of everything and enjoy it. And maybe actually I don't want to go into a role that's say all consuming and very structured and focused. And actually maybe that's surprisingly not what I'm like. And I kind of thought I might have been.
Right. No, well, this is interesting because I think one of the themes there, Emily, that's powerful for existing athletes in any discipline, they don't have to be rowers in any discipline, is the fact that you've tried a couple of things. You had that sort of dip your toe in the water between Tokyo and Paris, and then you had another role as you retired, and you've been very candid there. It wasn't for you. You didn't enjoy it, and that's absolutely fine. We always say to people, very rarely does somebody step out and there's the perfect key for the lot. You open the door and you step into the perfect role. So it was lovely to hear you articulate that wasn't quite for me. But you've then evolved into your own hybrid, and immediately you can see the energy and the enjoyment shining through you when you're talking about it. That you love the job you've got in the art sector, but you also blending in elements of PT. It's obviously totally different. Coaching work, public speaking. So again, it's a lovely model that we often say to people: is experiment, try different things, find out what you enjoy. But just going back to the art sector, obviously that is what you studied in as well, isn't it, Emily? So that was sort of a central, I suppose, cog in your thinking that when I finish rowing, whenever that may be, this is a sector that I want to ultimately step into. So you had that clarity throughout your career. How much easier did that make things for you? Because you've got a little bit of a rough idea of where you're going. There was a plan. I don't know how detailed that plan was, but did that give you a bit of comfort that you knew where you wanted to sort of step into when you'd finished rowing?
It definitely helped, but it's been interesting. So it's certainly a sector where like an Olympic gold means very little to anybody. Um,
Fair point.
which is fine. I'd already sort of realized that after sort of, I guess, Tokyo, despite not having one. My master's was Asian art and I focused on Japanese art, and it's been a bit of a process, kind of realizing like how small the Japanese market is, how hard it is to get a job. Like all the big auction houses essentially have closed down their Japanese departments and Asian art as an umbrella, so they want people who speak Mandarin, and kind of sort of reassessing and being like, okay, well, actually, like that was kind of the idea that I had for my career, like where I vaguely wanted to go, but I have to be quite open about where I could potentially end up, and like it might be somewhere totally different to where I thought,
Hmm.
because like that's the reality of, I don't know, the art world, the art market. But that's also okay. Like sport is so linear, like, and the way my career played out, it was so kind of like there's the end point, completed it, done. But that's just not how the real world works. And talking to people and finding out about other people's careers definitely helped allow me to let go of kind of having a fixed goal or fixed idea of where I wanted to end up. Like, if in the future I end up working with Japanese art, that's great, that's fantastic. If in the future I have a job somewhere else and I just have a little bit of money that I can spend on collecting my own stuff, that's also fine.
Yeah.
So it's been an interesting kind of shift of, yes, I knew vaguely where I wanted to go, and that was a great starting point, but also letting go of preconceived ideas of exactly where that path would take me.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. And I suppose one of my curiosities is also always from your perspective, has this transition from Olympian competing, that very structured environment, into this sector, and as you've already alluded to there, how you've had to remain open-minded and slightly tweak the direction of what you're doing. Would you say, as a summation, it's been an easier process to make this transition than you imagined, or has it been harder than you imagined, Emily?
It's been easier, but I think that's mostly because I put a lot of work into how I was going to do it.
Okay.
Um, so I sort of planned like, okay, well, regardless of what the result is, I'm going to give myself 6 months or so, like after Paris, to decompress, like explore what's out there, just say yes to everything that comes my way and enjoy that. And then I'll find a job and then kind of go from there. It definitely helped that I was very done emotionally with rowing, but also I was injured. Straight after the games, I had a bulging disc in my neck, which stopped me from, in that time immediately after the games, like being like, oh, well, just row 16K and then do weights. And then like,
Yeah.
maybe I'll just like, do a little 60-minute bike. And that's not that much training. And just slipping into old habits, like it stopped me from doing loads of training and just going back
Interesting. Yeah,
into,
the temptation to step
mm,
back into what you knew.
yeah.
Interesting.
So that definitely helped.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And again, this is shining through, and it's a theme that I admire in you, and something we advocate to all the athletes we talk about. Having a plan, whatever it is, always makes it easier. What you've then alluded to perfectly is that plan evolves. Of course it does, but there's a general destination. It's a cheesy analogy, but we know we're driving to a certain city. Maybe the route's going to evolve. Maybe we encounter traffic or a detour, but we sort of know where we're going. You knew the sector you wanted to be in, but the Asian art, the Japanese art element, you've tweaked it, but you didn't start the thought process at the point of which you stepped out of the boat in Paris. And equally, I like that element of the plan of I am going to be comfortable giving myself 6 months. I'm not going to put myself under immediate pressure to get a job. I'm going to enjoy life, say yes to things. So I think that's another nice part of the plan. And anybody that's fearful of identity and challenges, well, go out and find all the things you can do that you couldn't do, the things you were saying no to, the things that would compromise your training. You can actually live a bit more of a normal life, which will help that adjustment.
Mm.
So it might not be directly relevant because you've already said, look, being an Olympic gold medal winner hasn't given me a great deal of kudos coming into the arts sector. But that point aside, I'm always curious with regard to transferable skills. Obviously, you'll have a whole locker of skills that you developed as an elite athlete. Once you stepped out of the boat, stepped into this sector, is there anything in particular that you can see now that's helping you in this next chapter that you think, well, that's something I definitely developed as an Olympic rower that is now serving me as I'm trying to build this next chapter of my career?
Well, definitely. And I think one of the things that was noticeable was people would kind of be a bit unconvinced by my CV, but if they actually saw me working, they were like, "Oh, like the ability to concentrate on a task, like just doesn't seem to be something the general population does well in the
Right.
same
Yeah.
way that someone that's rowed in circles around a lake hundreds of times a day
Yeah.
can." And that the like taking feedback, not being afraid of asking for like constructive criticism, the time management, like a lot of the transferable skills that everybody talks about. For me, it was noticing like once I was in front of someone showing them that, that's when I think it would click in their mind a little bit more. Like, oh, okay, like they still don't really quite get it, but I think they get it a bit more.
Yes, yeah, and how I mean, how important were the placements that you did? Because you make a very pertinent point there. The CV is one element. I always view a CV as it's a filter. It needs to be of a certain level, not covered in grammatical errors, etc., and spelling mistakes to just get you into the room. But it's very much about how you interact, the impression you make, the conversations you have in an interview, etc. Now, when we were researching you, it sounded like there was placements and things you were doing and conversations you were having. So, was that part of your plan that you'd put yourself out there? People sort of knew who you were. Did that help with where you ultimately ended up, or not? I'm just curious because you mentioned in our research there's a couple of elements there about actually going on placements and going out and exploring this sector.
I mean, it definitely helped in terms of coming out and being able to present a CV that wasn't just like rowing. Um, has that helped me get either of the jobs I've had? No. They were actually all three of them were just like random LinkedIn ads that I was like, screw it, whatever. I definitely have a policy of throw everything at the wall and see what sticks.
Hmm.
So I think it's kind of a, like at the moment, all those conversations, all those connections, they've taught me about the art world and what to expect, and the potential challenges of like specifically the Japanese stuff, like talking to everyone and they're like, oh, it's a nightmare. I'm like, okay, right, well now I know that. And it's also you don't know when these things will pay off. Like, in 5 years down the line, I've still got some connections. I still see people at lectures or whatever, and suddenly like it's that one conversation, that one invite, that one small little thing that will pay off. But in the meantime, just enjoying meeting new people, talking to different people about their experiences, and just like learning, I think has been my attitude towards it. Has it
Yeah.
practically helped? Not yet.
Well, and I think it has from my perspective. If I put my CEO hat on, the fact that you were proactive and actually engaged in the placements is one of those points of differentiation. As you very humbly sort of skirted past, the CV could just say, "I'm an Olympian," and therefore that should be enough in its own right. But the fact that you proactively sought out the placements, I think, gives you that extra bit of gravitas in the CV process. And then you finish the point very articulately again, talking about network and connections. So even though they might not have directly put you into the job you're in now, you're building relationships, you're having conversations. And as with any of us, you never quite know when those networks may come to the fore. But if you don't talk to people and you don't put yourself in those conversations, then the network stays very small. So, no, I think that's an interesting perspective, Emily. Just in terms of the old notion we talk a lot about, we're all geniuses with the benefit of hindsight, but you have to live these things to get the wisdom from hindsight. So many of our listeners and so many people in the ATA community are still actively competing and are preparing for that transition. So if I was to say to you, could you look at your sort of exit, your transition out of elite sport and pull out one particular do this. As a do, if you do this, I think it'll make your transition that little bit easier. And on the other side of the coin, are you able to pull out something and say, do you know, on reflection and with the benefit of hindsight, don't do this, and that will also help make your transition out of elite sport a little bit easier. What comes to mind on those questions, Emily?
Um, I think with the do-dos, definitely the identity factor is like a massive one. And also, I guess specifically with us in Paris, like we were there to get a gold medal, but that wasn't a guarantee. So actually having a lot of conversations about how we'd be able to walk away without a gold medal and still be okay and still be able to go away and live our lives and be sort of like as at peace with it as you can
Yes.
be. So part of that for me was how I was in the squad. I was put myself forward as an athlete rep, so kind of I guess like a prefect
Yeah.
um, within the women's squad and trying to be, a bit more of a leader, have a bit more influence on the culture and making it a more positive environment, um, to kind of give me something that I could take away and feel proud of that wasn't caught up in whether or not I had a medal at the end of it. So I think definitely considering A, your identity away from sport, and B, like your identity within sport that's not necessarily results driven,
Yes.
hugely important.
Yeah, no, I
No.
like that. That's great wisdom, sort of de-escalating some of that pressure, particularly in competitions such as the Olympic cycles. As it's a little bit different for people in team sports, as we alluded to earlier. You can have a terrible day, and you can always pick yourself up 7 days later. There's another match, but
Mm.
when these cycles come around, I think that's a very wise strategy to try and take some of the pressure off that binary: win or loss. Loss is a disaster. Win is everything. So yeah, that's an interesting perspective.
And in terms of what I wouldn't do, it's hard because I feel bad saying this, but I think I did a really good job of transitioning out. But I also suspect that it will continue to be a process. So yeah, I said I'm still getting injuries. I've actually spent about the last 11 weeks with crutches because I got a stress fracture in the neck of my femur. So I'm sort of starting to suspect that some of the athlete identity is still unresolved, maybe. Um,
So is that am I deducing there that still pushing yourself quite hard physically?
which isn't, yeah, I guess like compared to what's probably normal, but when I think to what I was doing 3 years ago, like it's not. So it's still figuring out how sport and staying active play a role in my life.
Hmm.
My one hard rule is I'd never say no to a social engagement for the sake of training, which is quite a good rule. But yeah, I think the transition will continue, and I'm trying to not overthink it
Yeah.
and like letting it kind of be and happen and explore where it takes me, but hopefully not break any more bones.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, yeah, that's great advice. If you put it there, don't break any more bones is
Yeah.
definitely a don't. But I think just sort of listening to you there, I think what you're saying don't expect the transition to be immediate. And I think that
Mm,
that's another important insight, having listened to you and so many athletes on this, that it's a very personal journey, and there is no right and wrong. There is no one size fits all. Don't put pressure on yourself to say, I'm 6 months out. You're circa, coming up to 2 years, not quite there yet. So I think that's powerful for people to hear as well. There are adjustments everywhere. You've talked about, what is a
mm,
normal level of training for an Olympic athlete to transition, and finding that route back into social life and things. There's a whole raft of things that will probably take years in some cases to find the right balance. So yeah, I would interpret that as, do the work on your identity, but don't expect the transition to be immediate. It's different for everybody.
mm.
Just on the notion of advice, we're just moving into a couple of sort of quick fire questions, Emily. One of the things that proves really popular on these conversations is just giving you no time to think. Now, you may have listened to us asking these to other people, but there is no right and wrong answer. Just shoot from the hip. But first quick fire question is, what's the best piece of advice you've been given that you're willing to share? It could be personal, it could be professional. It's just accessing a little gem or a little perspective of wisdom that you share to the ATA listeners.
So this one was at university. I'll try and keep it concise, but basically, like I said before, with the who do you want to be within the squad and within your team, and people will remember you not necessarily for your results, but how you were as a person and a teammate. So that's definitely stuck with me and driven how I want to be as a person and how I want to be as an athlete within my job now as well.
Love that, and that's part of your legacy, isn't it? Yeah, that's a how people remember you is based on your actions and your contribution. So I love that from a teammate perspective, and that, as you say, is relevant to everybody in every business in every sector. How you operate as a team mate, as a colleague. The impact you have on other people. I think that's a fabulous one. Second one, just to hit you with, is there a particular book that's obviously you've studied widely, and you might give us a really obscure text here in Japanese or Asian art that everyone will be like, oh, I'm not sure I can cope with that one. But is there a book that's had an impact on you through the years, Emily, that you would say, yeah, that's a recommendation I would make to people to have a look at this one?
Well, it's hard because yeah, like a lot of what I read is Japanese fiction, or it's non-fiction about Japanese fiction. A difficult one. I really loved the Wind Up Bird Chronicles, which then led me to Murakami. And I love his books, always love his books. And then he actually wrote a book called What I Think About When I Talk About Running. So as well as being an author, he just got really into marathons, and it was very interesting reading sort of it was a very like personal sort of description of like what running is to him, and sort of an interesting insight into like almost like a civilian take on competing or
Yeah.
like doing sport to quite a high level.
Love it. Love it. Well, I haven't heard of either of those series or that book. So I mean, I love it. It's a huge passion of mine. So selfishly, I always love to ask this question because immediately jump on Amazon and check them out. So next one is an oldie, but it's a goodie. You'll have heard this before, but nonetheless, it always elicits interesting answers. So you're hosting a dinner party, three guests you can bring along. You've got magic powers, so they can be dead or alive. You're bringing them back for an evening of good company and social discussion. Who's on the guest list for you, Emily?
It's always a hard one. Yeah, I don't know. I'd probably maybe I'll go down the Japanese art route and go with Murasaki and then Hokusai. Um, and the third one, Katsuma, I think. Yeah, so just modern
There's a
art, like
theme.
contemporary art, Edo period, like 17th century, and then a proper old author.
Fabulous. No, I love it. I love it. And obviously you can sense this is your passion. Your passion shines through even in that guest list. You found your passion. You're in the right space now. Last but not least, from our perspective, Emily, who would be a good guest to invite onto the show? Who do you think, is there anybody in your network where you think, well, they've had an interesting story of transition and stepping out of their elite sport world into the next chapter? Is there anybody that you think, well, they'd be a good person for us to approach and invite onto the show?
I mean, I think probably most of my teammates from over my own career, I feel very lucky. It did feel a little bit like, obviously, Imogen aside, because she's carried on. It felt a little bit like I was the last one standing by the end. And I feel very lucky to have rode with a number of very emotionally intelligent, switched on women who I could watch transition out of sport and see that life away from sport was great and was okay. So pretty much, yeah, anybody who was in a quad or a double with over those sort of 9 years I was on the team, I
Right.
think would be interesting, to
Would
be
be a good
honest.
one. Yeah, well, great. No, there's a group there that we can look into. So that's fabulous. Thank you. So, Emily, I think from our perspective, it's certainly listening to you today, as expected, it's been a fascinating journey. It's lovely to hear how well you've transitioned. So many themes that I think are transferable to people listening about having a plan, being comfortable that there's a process when it comes to identity, not putting pressure on yourself to get it right overnight, being willing to step into a role and then say, actually, all right, the finance is there, it's allowed me to buy a flat, but this is not going to fulfill me. I need to step out of this role and find something else. I love the fact that you've got that hybrid element as well, where you're doing multiple things and deriving fulfillment from PT, from speaking, from coaching, and from being in the arts sector. So I think it's a really nice case study, and it's also lovely to be able to speak to an athlete that endures such a horrendous, chapter as you did at Tokyo, which was still a great positive, but I know how much that must have hurt, and then comes back, gets back in and steps up and wins the gold. So it's nice to have that fairy tale ending as well. So obviously a huge thank you for your time today, Emily. If anybody wants to reach out, connect with you as a consequence of listening to this, they're curious just to build a connection, where's the best place for people to find you?
Probably Instagram, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, the easiest way generally.
Yeah, and what's your we'll put your sort of handle into the show notes, but what's your sort of
So
presence on Instagram?
it's very boring. It's just Emily Elizabeth Craig.
There we go. No, simple, easy to find you. So people can find that nice and easily. Emily, as I said, absolute pleasure talking to you. Congratulations on the fabulous career that you had, and congratulations for the career you're now building. It's a pleasure to have talked to you today. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us this week on our ATA podcast. If you found this conversation insightful and it resonates with your journey, please subscribe, follow the show, and stay connected with us for more insights, resources, and information on how we at ATA are supporting your preparation for life beyond the game.